Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Lean. This is another Bristlecone broadcast. I'm here with Dmitry Vilchinsky, who's the head of our modern engineering studio. And today we're going to be talking about mainframes. Dmitry just got off of a 5-year project where one company had to upgrade part of its mainframe, not because anything was wrong with it, just because the business needs dictated an upgrade. And that meant that they had to do a rather intensive work to migrate their mainframe. So, Dmitry, talk to me a little bit about this problem that a lot of companies, not just the company you were dealing with, but a lot of companies are facing an issue when it comes to mainframes. What is the nature of that problem?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I think that the main problem here is impossibility to scale or upgrade these existing systems. They are operating for decades on the mainframes, these business critical systems. Many companies actually they literally live on these systems, and they're extremely sensitive about anything happening with them, and they're fine to keep working them as is. But in certain cases, in certain situations, they simply can't sustain the business without upgrades of these systems. And they cannot upgrade them because, first of all, the people who knew the system being developed like 30 years ago, they're out. They're out of the company, and it's sometimes out of the market and sometimes out of life. Uh, so that's really the situation happening with these companies and these type of technologies, which are decades old. So that's the first thing. But the business demand to upgrade the system, to bring new functionality, bring new scalability, maybe to previous hundreds of thousands of users. Now they need to serve millions, and they can't. And the business really depends on that capability to bring that million users or 10 million users. So that's sort of things which are driving the companies to make a significant step out of these working fine mainframes, systems on the mainframes. They need to be able to scale them, to upgrade them, and there are not really much options to do so.
You know, it's funny because it really reminds me, all the time we hear about these languages that are in danger across the world of going extinct because the people who speak them are dying. And I guess it's no different than technology languages because mainframes are primarily use COBOL, correct?
Correct. Yeah, COBOL, Fortran. Most of the mainframes we dealing with, they are on COBOL, and there are very few people in the world left who knows the technology. Then there was evolving, and they know current technologies like C++ or Java, and they're capable to transform that COBOL code into C++ or Java code, and change the architecture. And this migration, this code transition from one language to another, partially could be done automatically, but it's never going to be clean. It needs a lot of work and understanding what was in the initial code, in the initial system, and what is result after that conversion, and clean it up, make it connected again to control all of the dependencies before in that mainframe. And imagine for the decades, there was, for example, some defect appeared. This defect was patched with some new release of the software, fixing this particular defect. Mm-hmm. People who were fixing this defect, developing this little patch to plug over there, they disappear. There are no documentation, and there are tens or maybe hundreds or even thousands patches like that. Nobody knows what they're doing.
So, I mean, it really sounds like it's a nightmare, but why don't they just migrate? I mean, what's holding them back? It sounds like it's a very clear problem. Why don't they just do it?
That's not the only problem. Another problem is actually cost of the operations in the mainframe, which is extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. And all the current technology is definitely ready to absorb all of that needs from the computation, from the reliability. It's all here. So answering your question, why? First of all, it's expensive. It's not even just not cheap. It's really expensive, and it's risky for the business. They're willing to guarantee that nothing will going to happen with existing business because the whole company depends on it. The whole business and presence on the market depend on that system works on a mainframe, for example. So there are few approaches exist, and some of the companies already moving out. And that's for some of the companies who provides mainframes as a service, let's say, with a new terminology, this business is dying because companies finally moving out, they finding the documentation, they finding the people, they migrating the code from COBOL to Java, for example. Then they do the polishing and the deployment of the new code. It could be on-prem deployment, could be in cloud deployment, depending how far in the future they are looking. And the companies, multiple companies, software providers, custom software development companies, they provide services for such migrations.
Okay.
The one-to-one is difficult.
So one-to-one is difficult. What's the way that you would prefer to do it, or you think is probably one of the better ways to approach this problem?
I think the migration of the code is not the best idea. It could work maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when we still have plenty of people who understand COBOL, who could read and who could convert it to the new languages. Now we don't have such luxury to access to such labor on the market. Another approach which could help a lot, I think, is a reverse engineering. So when we apply the business mechanism, we apply the business analysis, we apply system analyst, and we actually create the specification of that system which is currently in work on the mainframe, and build the system from scratch on a new set of technologies, which I believe could be faster and less expensive in comparison to the conversion of the COBOL code to Java and then clean it up and deploy it in the new architecture. Probably the most difficult part is to build that specification, to understand what exactly inside of that system on a mainframe, what dependencies exist between the other systems, how to organize and keep these dependencies working on the new architecture, on the new system. But it's all doable. It's certain investment in the initial stage of the understanding what the final product should be and what the limitation they wanna have and what these scalability parameters they wanna have. Because that's one of the reasons to migrate. They wanna become scalable from functionality perspective, from the accessibility perspective, reliability and security. That's another items now, because supporting the mainframe became more and more expensive and more difficult. So migration to the new technologies is definitely the option.
So it sounds like it's not just a question of migrating. It's really sort of understanding where the business is going to be for the next 20 years and putting it into a situation that is scalable and can grow for whatever is going to happen 10 years from now. So it's not just a matter of getting it to present state, but making it so that it can be scalable to a future state as well, correct?
I believe so. Let's take a look on the insurance companies, for example.
Okay.
In the beginning of the company existence, they will start working with the minimum amount of the companies, partners, people at the end, the final consumers, and this number is growing. And if system was, even if they have like 10 times reserve for the amount of the transactions, now this amount of transactions go to the million time. So they need to be able to scale for the bigger amount of the transactions and ability to get more information, because more and more information coming in a stream manner, and they need to be able to absorb it and compute and analyze and make smart decisions.
Now, do you have to do this all at once, or can you migrate in pieces? Like, what's a smart way to do it?
I believe you can migrate in pieces, and that's probably the smartest way. So you can disassemble your existing set of systems, seeing which system could be lift and shifted, for example, to the cloud as a virtual machine, and keep working for the cloud as like it is on a mainframe, but from the cloud as a virtual machine. And then you start redeveloping. And at a certain moment, when you see the mirror application works, you can just substitute one with another, and then go with the next one, then go with the next one. Understanding the priorities, understanding the impact from each of the such systems to be subtracted from the mainframe and deployed in the cloud or in on-prem if they are too sensitive for the data. It's all doable. Step by step, we can do it.
Now, if you are going to migrate your mainframe, and I know a lot of these enterprises are in the billions of dollars of market cap, Who's involved in a decision like that? It's not just the business owners, correct? It seems to be a whole enterprise decision, or how does that work?
I'm quite confident it's a whole enterprise decision. So the chief security officer is involved, chief operational officer is involved, the information officer is involved. So all the people who are actually organize operations in the certain infrastructure of the IT systems. That's all the people to make a decision. Most probably, this is CIO first of all. That's the person who is building the strategy for the next decade or 2 decades for the company, and what the infrastructure going to be used and how to migrate from one to another if there is such need. So all of that parameters, there are also plenty of regulations exist. So security officers need to be sure that all the regulations are there for the new systems, for the new architectures. And if there are certain requirements for the reliability and security of the system, that the cloud they've chosen is in corresponding level of that security and all of the requirements. So
it's a lot. So I have a question. Once you've completely migrated off of the mainframe, what do they do with that mainframe? I mean, that's a huge piece of equipment. What happens to it? Is it like a graveyard for mainframes, or they sink it into the ocean and make a coral reef? What do they do with it?
I think there's still lag maybe 1 year, even after the migration, for the support in that, just in case. And also the contracts, they are minimum 1 year long for utilization of that mainframes. But probably there's some mythical graveyard for the mainframes exists somewhere in the middle of the desert.
That's awesome. Well, Dmitry, thanks so much for this conversation. I found it very insightful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.